Welcome to the Andy Stanley Leadership Podcast Reverb, a conversation designed to help leaders go even further faster by digging deeper into this month's episode. I'm your host, Suzy Gray. Andy, in last week's conversation, you talked with Jim Collins about his new book, What to Make of a Life.
And it was what to make of a great conversation, wasn't it?
It was amazing.
Yeah, he gave us so much time, but then again, you have been inviting him to be on the podcast for how many years?
A couple of years now. Yeah.
And you were relentless in a good way, and they said, just wait. And so they came through, and wow, what a great conversation, because it's a great book. Yeah, and I had time to read the whole book and digest it, and as I said on the podcast, Andrew's reading it, and it was a great conversation.
It was a great conversation and a great book. Well, the book we talked about is Jim's new book, What to Make of a Life, and in it, you know, you guys covered a lot of ground in your conversation about the book, and one of the ideas that stood out from your conversation was the idea of cliffs and fog. And I love the fact that he kind of dispelled, no, only certain people are going to have cliffs in life. He's like, no, cliffs are a regular part of life. And then talks about, and often after a cliff comes the fog. And so let's just start there. When Jim talks about cliffs and fog, what stood out to you in that conversation?
Well, I think anybody that reads the book immediately thinks about their own cliffs.
That's right.
And you don't have to live that long to have cliffs, whether it was the girl who broke up with you in high school, or the, parents divorcing and suddenly you're ping-ponging back and forth between parents. The first job that doesn't go well. I was on academic probation, and then, first academic warning, then academic probation at Georgia State. And my mom said to me famously, Andy, college isn't for everyone. That was a cliff. I'm like, oh, if your mom doesn't even believe you can finish college,
so encouraging.
Things aren't going well. Anyway, so I think we all think about cliffs, and the idea that after a cliff, after an unexpected ending or tragic ending, or even something good happens, but now it's over and now what? There is the fog of what's next. So I think it's something everybody can relate to. And what was great is he normalized it. He's like, welcome to life.
That's right.
You can't avoid them. Again, remember he said they tried in profiling these people, they decided, well, let's study the people who didn't have cliffs.
The cliff-free life people.
Yeah, and there were none.
Yeah, none at all.
So we get to expect it when it happens. It's not the end of the world. Every parent has had that conversation, because our kids, something happens and we think, oh, it's the end. My life will never be the same. And we chuckle on the inside and try to look heartbroken on the outside because we know better.
Right.
Well, it's true for those of us who are adults as well.
Yeah.
There's cliffs and there's fog, but his insight about how to come out of the fog and what not to do in the midst of the fog is so helpful. So that's sort of what came to mind. Now, as it relates to leadership, gosh, as leaders, we lead in the fog so many times, right? If something bad happens or something happened organizationally, or you think about COVID, the whole world went into a fog. And so the whole idea of simplex stepping, the phrase he uses to talk about how to respond in the midst of a fog, that you don't make big life-changing decisions. But again, asking the question, what's next? What can I do? What can I do? And for leaders, what we have to do is we have to give people something to do, because the point he makes, taking a step creates energy, energy creates clarity. So you got to do something. You got to take a baby step. That creates energy. Now you're moving in a direction. So all of that was so helpful and so applicable for leaders, again, whose companies or organizations are in a bit of a season of fog, and they're responsible for leading the organization through the fog.
Yeah. He said, and movement creates energy, and that fuels more movement, and a feeling of momentum, even if you don't know where that momentum is taking you, becomes a reality.
Yeah.
And I loved that idea of that is the momentum that eventually gets you out of it. And actually reminded me of your idea of gaining and sustaining momentum. Like there is something about getting the flywheel of momentum spinning that keeps momentum happening.
Yeah. And when people look back, or when we look back on other people's stories, it's so obvious.
Yeah.
And we forget that the people who had breakthrough ideas or done amazing things in the world, they did not know their story. They didn't have a story yet. Their story was in process. And again, we get the highlight reels most of the time. We don't get the fog story. And so for those of us in leadership, or if you're in leadership right now and you're not sure how things are going to work out. Hey, there's something you can do even when you're not sure what to do. And there's a direction you can move in, even though, to his point, you don't know what the ultimate destination is. And I think that's another powerful idea. You don't have to know the destination in order to take a step in a direction, because direction ultimately is what opens the door or leads to a destination. So anyway, all of that's super appropriate to leadership, even though we didn't lean into it. But, at the end of the book, Suzy, I'm kind of jumping ahead. He circles back around at the end of the book and talks about leadership. We didn't get into that part of the book and the discussion, but he applies some of that to his renewed understanding of leadership.
Yeah. So what do you think, what do you think the dangers are, for leadership, or that you've experienced, of outrunning fog instead of navigating it well?
Well, there's two things. First, as a leader, I live with, and I know better, but I still live with the pressure that I should know. I should know what to do. I should know what's next. I should know I should know. If I was a good leader, I would know. And Jim gives us permission not to know. And when you're in the fog, you cannot see.
You cannot see.
Yeah, so there's nothing wrong with you. You haven't done anything wrong. You're just in the fog. So to give ourselves permission to acknowledge we don't know. And this is, in leadership, so important with teams, is to be able to acknowledge current reality and point in a direction and give people something to do, to say, I'm not sure how this is going to work out, but we've been in situations like this before. So in the meantime, here's what we're going to do. I'm not sure where this is ultimately going to lead, but in the meantime, this is what we're going to do. So to come up with short-term plans, again, because movement creates energy, which creates clarity, and our responsibility is to get things moving without a clear picture of the destination, and not to get locked into hey, we shouldn't do anything
until we figure this all out.
Until we know what the destination is. That's almost always a mistake. So again, there are definitely takeaways as it relates to organizational leadership or just personal leadership.
Personal leadership. Yeah. And I do think it's interesting because those small steps in the fog, the momentum is felt, because it feels like, I had a little win. I don't exactly know where we're going, but that felt like, that felt like a win. Yeah. And small wins compounded over time, makes you feel like you're winning. And I think that's what creates that momentum.
It also generates creativity, and a step in a direction creates more options. And it's a great reminder not to get stuck. When I finished graduate school, I was going to go to Baylor University to get a PhD, and I didn't get accepted into the program. And I know everyone's shocked. My GRE scores weren't great, and it was a small program. And other people said, "Oh, it was political. Your dad was president of the Southern Baptist Convention," but it was my score. I know what I'm not confused as to why I didn't get into the PhD program at Baylor. Anyway, but it was a cliff. It was like, wait, I was dating a girl. She was at Baylor. I was going to go to Baylor. I was going to get a job at a church, get my PhD, maybe we'd get married, and then boom.
All that changes.
And I go to the office and I'm looking for my acceptance notification, and they went to the other file and handed me that other letter. And now my future goes dark. I'm graduating the next week from DTS, and I literally have nothing to do. Yeah. But you take a step. So I went home, said, what can I do? And took a job with my dad's church and did that for 10 years. And, you just can't,
the next step.
Can't get stuck in the fog. And
I think that example is a good example of why Jim said there's a fog of youth. Yeah. Because when you finish college, or when you are working toward grad school or whatever, there's these moments of like, oh, now what?
Yeah.
And that's why you said you were even going to do this as a family.
You read the book as a family?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to try to. That's 6 adults I've got to convince to read a book all at the same time, and they all have babies. So we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah.
But it's but I do want them to read, or at least even listen to the audio version of the book, because the book creates language, and sometimes it's hard to talk about intangible concepts without language, without common language. And the book is full of common language.
So helpful.
Even the idea of a cliff or a fog. Hey, you guys just hit a cliff as a couple. Hey, you're in the fog right now. Guess what? Fogs don't last forever. Here's some things you can do. So again, just having common language organizationally or even as a family, huge.
So helpful.
Yeah, he's given us so much.
So helpful. Andy, another thing I loved that I don't think you and Jim got to in your conversation, but it's in the book when he's talking about this idea of constellation of encoding. He says, keep in mind, encoding lies within, waiting to be discovered, rather than being taught from without.
Yep.
I thought that was such a powerful reminder that so much of what we think is, I need to be taught that, versus I need to look within and discover what I'm uniquely built and wired and
So when you think about your own journey, can you think about a moment or a season where you kind of had this aha moment where you thought, oh, this is what I was made for, this is what I love to do, or this is the thing. And it wasn't necessarily a job, but maybe it was something about a job, because he gives the illustration of, I think he was working for Hewlett Packard and he was not in his stream or his encoding. And they asked him to do a research project kind of as a side thing. And when he started doing that, he realized, oh, he had to be asked to do it to discover that it meshed with his natural encoding. So did you ever have an experience like that professionally where it's like, oh, this is my thing? Or
I think I really wanted to understand early on in my career. I kept ending up in jobs that were never the core of the business. It was always the fringe. So I was in photonic switching at a company that made phone gear. And then I went to Bell South, and this was back when there was landlines and cellular was just coming, into focus. And I wanted to do things that were at the edge of what was the core of the business. And I've always kind of ended up in these like fringe jobs. The last job I had was
that good?
Well, it was a proof of concept job, but I couldn't figure out, like, why do I always gravitate?
Oh, you gravitated.
I gravitated to it. But
so it was related to your encoding somehow.
It was, but I couldn't name it. I just kept realizing I keep ending up in these jobs. And Cheryl Batchelder, actually, back when she was CEO of Popeyes, she had told me about a standout assessment. And she said, I was talking to her about this, and she said, you should take the standout. And I took it, and I came out as a pioneer influencer. And I read the description, and I was like, that's why I keep ending up on all of these, like, do something different, do something fringe, do something that's kind of pushing the edge of whatever organization I'm in.
So you gravitated toward those environments.
I gravitated toward it, but I couldn't name it. And then once I named it, I was like, oh, I will never be good in a run rate job. I just won't be.
Yeah. Well, what you're doing now with your move is definitely that.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely that.
Yeah,
but I think that's why I love it.
Yeah.
But knowing that encoding for me, I know I can't be in a this is how we do it until further notice environment, because I want to look at, like, but what's just over that edge?
Yeah. So when he was talking about encoding, I had a memory. I remember this a little bit different. I worked at a traditional Southern Baptist church, worked for my dad for 10 years. And about year 8, they bought this property out on the edge of town with a bunch of warehouses, an Avon packing plant. And the deacon said, Andy, would you go out there and start a second site, a second campus? And then we're going to sell the downtown property and everybody's going to move out there. And then they said, but unfortunately, it's very raw. It's a warehouse. We're not going to be able to provide. And they named all the traditional things we wouldn't be able to do out there, which were things I didn't want to do anyway. And I tried to act sad, like, oh, I don't know how we're going to get by without a choir and all this stuff. Anyway,
we'll do our best.
We'll do our best. So I took these people I loved working with, and this is the moment. So we had our first service in the warehouse, very raw. And Sandra and I walked out the door, and we were walking to the construction trailer, which was our sort of office on Sunday morning. And I turned to her and I said, that's what I want to do the rest of my life.
Wow.
There was something about communicating in that environment on a Sunday morning that was raw and casual and informal. And it couldn't be the traditional.
Right.
It was like, I thought this, whatever that was. I mean, I've been teaching for years. I've been preaching for years. I mean, none of that was new. But the combination of things was like, okay, I can't go back. This is what I want to do.
That's your lightning bolt.
So, yeah. So again, but it's opportunity leads to opportunity. And then somewhere along the way, if you're looking for it, you catch sight of it and something lights up. And the advantage of reading this book is it just reminds us to be looking for those things, to help our kids look for those things.
Yes.
I feel like it's fun watching my young adult married kids discover and figure things out. But sometimes you just have to try a lot of things. But to be able to say to them, hey, you need to look for your encoding and focus your time and energy. And the more time and energy you can give to your encoding, the happier you will be,
right,
the more content you will be, the more motivated you will be, and probably the more successful you'll be. But even if you're not successful in the traditional ways we think of success, you're going to be happy and content because you're going to be in sync with what you were created, not necessarily what you were created to do, but the kind of thing you were created to do.
Yeah. Well, Andy, that was a great conversation about your conversation with Jim, because I just enjoy this content so much. I don't think I can get enough of it. So, Andy, as always, thanks for diving deeper on this month's topic.
Yep.
And to our listeners, thanks for listening to Reverb. If you found this helpful, please share it with another leader. And as always, subscribe wherever you listen and visit andystanley.com/podcast for more resources to help you go even further, faster.